Hello everyone and welcome to Geotab's online training. Thanks for joining us today for Tuesday's talk. This is Carrie Carter and today I have Stephanie with us on the line, and we are going to go through ensuring uptime in the fleet to ensure every device is communicating at all times and everything that's involved in that. And we're going to go through a whole list of things that I think can help everyone to getting everything running all the time and keeping your fleet communicating. With that, Steph, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thanks, Carrie. Hey guys, I hope that you enjoyed today's training session. We tried to go through and give you guys all the best practices and thought processes around ensuring device uptime, starting with the fact that the quality of the Geotab Go device is exceptional. Just to level set everything, we shipped 168,000 Go 7 devices. Of those 168,000, 192 actually had a defect when they were RMA'd to us. So that gives us a 0.001% failure rate. So I guess the moral of the story is that troubleshooting generally resolves most issues. Now, I just kind of want to start, and this is kind of goes everywhere, kind of a training session today. One of the things that I think is exceptionally important is making sure that the device is properly installed from the beginning, right? And there's a tool for that. Installmygps.com. There's a couple of different URLs that you can go to, but that's the basic one. It supports English, French, Spanish, German, and Japanese languages. So an installer in any of those countries can go onto his smartphone and check the install. You put in the installer name, the company, and then the device serial number. Those are required fields. Odometer, asset number, and comments are recommended fields. Now, I ran a sample here, and you can see that I put in my little G7 number, and I get the information that tells me when the last GPS record was, when it came in, last engine data came in, it is allowed to download, its SIM is active, and so on and so forth. So you get a lot of information back from the device just for entering 3 little fields and clicking go. I have a couple other examples here that just wanted to talk to in general. The one on the left shows a device that is not communicating. The device is allowed to download and the SIM is active, but it's not communicating. So in a situation like that, you'd want to check the cellular coverage in that area and make sure that that device has cell coverage where it is. The other one here is the device communicated 3 minutes ago, but it doesn't have any valid trip data. This one is from an upfitter where the truck is being installed inside of a big building. It's getting all the right information, but it doesn't have a GPS latch because it's inside. It will eventually get a GPS latch and that will go away, but you can just I just wanted to show you the differences. And then the one on the far right shows that the last GPS was 1 minute ago. It does have a recent power reset, so we just installed the device. That's to be expected, I guess. And then the more information gives you the protocols and things like that. There are some fault codes on this engine as we speak. Just some basic information about the health of the vehicle at the start. Now, when we talk about quality installs, it's really, really important, guys, that you understand the difference between the picture on the left and the picture on the right. That small 2-millimeter gap that you see on the left is enough to negatively impact the quality of data that you're going to get from the device. It'll give you VIN, odometer, accelerometers. It creates a host of other issues just having that tiny little gap because you don't have a good electronic connection. So if you see it looking like this on the left, you know you have a problem with your install. The one on the right, you can see how tightly it's seated. The pins are making good connections to the harness, so you're going to get good data. It's important at the Go device and the extension harness. It's also important going into the diagnostic plug of the individual vehicle. Heavy-duty vehicles typically have that locking collar that kind of holds it a little bit more securely. I would recommend zip tying if at all possible. Now, we talk about the installs. I want to talk a little bit about the deployment strategy and the thought process inside of the fleet. Telematics is a lot like a gym membership. If you buy it and you don't use it properly, you're not going to get the results that you we're looking for, right? So it's important to understand that inside of the fleet, there needs to be an owner for this telematics project. That person can have any one of a number of titles and can be in any one of a number of departments, safety, fleet, operations, doesn't matter. But there's somebody who's the head of the program, and that person is the one that we work with to set the policy. And that person is going to be the one that makes sure that that fleet is monitoring and enforcing the policies. Because again, if you don't have that level of management in there, you're not going to see the results from the telematics device. This is a resident expert. We train them up, get them very well skilled, and they're the ones that we work with on those annual reviews to see where the fleet has accomplished to date and where should we focus energies next. You know, we talk a lot about the 5 pillars and how we can get return on investment from each one of those pillars. You know, once we master one with our policies and procedures and we start to see results, then we should be looking at what's the next available thing. This is that person that we're going to work with on those things within the company. It is important that that owner inside there monitors that the supervisors in the field are following the policies. There's a really good example here, the strong policies regarding tampering. Now, if you don't have a lot of problems with tampering today, you probably don't need a strong tampering policy. If you don't have a strong policy today, you're probably going to see a higher level of tampering within the fleet. They're definitely cause and effect. As written by a large multinational fleet that we work with, there is a 0 tolerance for tampering. If your vehicle indicates that tampering may be present, the situation will be investigated. A certified Geotab installer will inspect the device and record the findings with photographs of the tampering evidence. The first incident of tampering will result in termination. The fleets that rely on this data rely on it so heavily that if you're going to take that data away from them, you no longer get to work for that company. If you take the devices offline, you're messing with the IFTA miles, you're messing with our productivity data, you're messing with our safety program. You know, you're negatively impacting a lot of things within the organization, so it's critically important that you have a clear and concise driver communication that explains what we are going to do if you tamper with the device. So, tamper prevention. The handy-dandy, jazzy blue serialized zip ties are an excellent way to prevent tampering. When you do that installmygps.com, you can record that snazzy little zip tie number, and when you look at the install history, and I did a sample up for you, you can see the zip tie that was installed at the time that the device was originally installed. If it's not a snazzy blue zip tie, or if it doesn't match that number, somebody's taken the device out of the vehicle for reasons other than what we allow. And that, again, becomes a tampering topic. If you move the device from one vehicle to another, it's very easy to just redo the zip seal with a new one and a new number. Management of anything requires that there are checks and balances. The managers of the local supervisors should use the audit log to make sure that they are logging into the My Geotab and investigating why a device is offline. I think we can sometimes rely overly heavily on the emailed reports, and that's great, but we have no audit trail on an emailed report. So if I send a Watchdog to a local supervisor and he's got 3 devices offline, I can tell that he didn't log into My Geotab and look and see why the device is offline. Okay? So don't get overly reliant on the emailed reports, because I think that that's just one step in the process that has to happen. Corporate owners should take one step further and ensure that the managers here on line 1 are also making sure that the policies are being enforced. Because if I don't make sure that the supervisor does it and his manager is doing it and I wait till it gets up to the head of corporate, it's way out of control by the time we understand what's going on, right? If I just say go forth and use telematics and I don't tell them how and when and what frequency they should be looking at reports, then I'm failing to give them the proper implementation steps to succeed, right? So it is important to be specific. I think it's also important that when you're creating your processes within the organization that you define how we're going to manage extra devices. Some fleets have a group that they call shop. When it goes in for maintenance, when it goes into the shop, they take the device and they temporarily move it into that group called shop, and they know that that device is expected to be in the shop for 3 weeks getting a new transmission. No big deal. But if it doesn't come out of the shop, I'm down an asset. Why is it taking so long for the shop to repair my vehicle, right? You can also create another group called spares. If I sell a vehicle and I pull the device before I sell it, I need to put it into this group called spares, but I also need to make sure that that device is suspended, right? It's also a good practice to make sure that none of your fellow fleet managers are sitting on a bunch of spare vehicle units before you go and buy another one, because you can just plug it into a new vehicle and it'll work just fine. So concepts of how to manage the devices, both from a recycling and from a temporary, it's going to be tied up in a shop getting collision damage repaired, transmission, major engine overhauls and those kind of things. Also, understanding that the unplug device and replace with a new device. If a device is being RMA'd, use the replace with new device button to remove the old serial number and assign a new one, maintaining all of the rules, groups, and data that's already been collected about that vehicle from the original serial number. If a device is terminated and is no longer going to be used, you can use the unplug button to make that data historic. Note that making it historic in the database does not stop the billing. You have to terminate the device in MyAdmin to stop billing. Okay, one of our larger fleets, about 15,000 vehicles, made a full swing from direct plug-ins to T-harnessing everything. They do all of their own maintenance, so it was very common that the vehicle would go into the shop, the guy would do whatever diagnostic scans he needed to do or whatever on the vehicle, and then he would forget to plug the Go device back in. And their offlines were out of control. Nothing wrong with the device. You'll find it sitting on the console, sitting in the floorboard, sitting wherever, but it's just not plugged back in. And again, that damages your ability to track IFTA miles and so on and so forth. So they went to T-harnesses and they saw an 80% improvement in the vehicle communication since they started T-harnessing the devices. There is no need to unplug the device to service or flash the ECM or do anything on that vehicle. It is perfectly okay to do all the mechanics work with that device plugged in. Our device will go quiet, it'll go to sleep, it won't do any more calls, it won't ask anything, it'll just sit there until that other scan tool gets off the network. The other thing about T-harnessing the install, it's out of sight, it's out of mind. It kind of helps you because the bad guys, if they steal your vehicle, don't know that it's in there because they can't immediately see it. So there's a lot of advantages to the T-harness install. Okay, the Watchdog Report, I think, is a couple of things. Let's go over them. I think that it's one of the most undersold and highly valuable reports that we have. Knowing when a vehicle communicates and when it doesn't vehicle communicates is critically important. I think that the Watchdog Report needs to go to the supervisor who is closest to the vehicle, because he would know if that asset's in the shop for repair. He can go out to the asset and look at the lights to see if the lights are on, and he can counsel the driver, terminate the driver, whatever the company policy is, if he finds that tampering is found. Next to the T-harness, I think this is the single biggest factor in device reporting numbers. Okay, so the Watchdog Report, we all know that it highlights which vehicles we need to troubleshoot that are not communicating, right? And you can customize this report. The one on the left uses an offline for more than 21 days as the point at which it worries about whether or not a vehicle needs to be looked at. The one on the right uses more reasonable, not communicated in the last 24 hours, so now I want to take a look at what's going on with that vehicle. And you can customize that value to anything in between to meet the needs of your customer's level of risk. So, take the basics and then you can build on it and switch it up and do whatever you need to do to make your customer happy. But the Watchdog Report in and of itself, and we all know what it is, but you can click on a link inside of the Watchdog Report and it'll open a web-based map and show you exactly where that vehicle was the last time it communicated. Which brings me to my next point. We helped a fleet that had a large portion of one depot's units offline. Like they had 18 vehicles and 15 of them weren't working. And it's like, the customer's like, oh, your stuff is crap, it doesn't work, it's this, it's that. And it's like, okay, one by one we went and we ticked on the button and we looked and they all went offline at the same little transmission shop. And the company didn't use that shop for any work. There was no legitimate reason for the vehicles to go there other than the fact that one guy knew a mechanic there and he went in and said, hey, what can you do to get rid of this thing for me? Can you unplug it? Can you make it stop? He then told his buddies and his pals, and one by one, every couple of days, one of the vehicles would scoot through that little transmission shop and unplug the device. So this is organized, word of mouth, tampering to take the system offline. Shame on the fleet for not paying attention and catching them as they were going along, but it's the importance of looking at where did the vehicle communicate last. If you see a pattern like that, I've also seen it happen when the vehicles go into like the rider truck, maintenance depot and things like that. They go offline because they had a legitimate service and nobody plugs them back in. Again, T-harnesses will help that, but looking at where they go offline is often a key thing to understanding what is causing it to be offline. If it's in a maintenance shop, you can bet it's unplugged. Okay, we have this really cool diagnostic flow clock, and basically it just wants you to go through the steps and says, does it have power? Does it have GPS? Does it have cellular? What does it do when you do this? What does it do when you do that? And it just walks you through the process of troubleshooting the device. It's easy, it's very simple to follow. You can check all your steps in the process. This is also posted on the forum. We went ahead and placed the link to the forum here just in case you want to go get a copy of it for yourself. Now we're going to go talk about what information you can get from inside of my Geotab to troubleshoot issues and problems. So I went to a particular device and I looked at the data, and it says, by clicking on it in the Vehicles and Devices tab, I clicked on it and did the install status button. It pops up like this and it shows me the last GPS record was an hour ago, but I look on the map and I've got no trip data. Then that is my first indication that this device is communicating to another database, right? I put it in one database, my coworker put it in another database. We didn't realize we were causing a conflict, but I can see this data coming off the store and forward, and I know it's talking right now. From this point, you can take that serial number and go into My Admin and look at your My Admin account and see what database is it sending data to, because the store and forward server will record in My Admin the database name that it's sending its data to. So that's a really good way to figure it out, and then you just go and make it historic in the other database, and it'll automatically start to flow into this database. You don't need a trouble ticket, you don't need a case number, you don't need anything, you just solved your own problem. The engine diagnostic and fault codes is a plethora of information about what's happening in the vehicle. Sometimes we think we've done a stellar install and we realize that we've got the GPS antenna slap up against the frame of the vehicle or the pillar underneath there, and we're getting lousy GPS receptions. In this particular example, you can see that the GPS quality is poor. You either have a bad device install or the vehicle is undercover. I've also seen it say that the GPS signal is being blocked, which might indicate that your driver has a GPS jammer. So if you're never getting any GPS, that might be the case. In this particular instance, I have poor GPS quality, and I know that I'm getting some signals, but it's not really consistent, and I definitely should reset the location of this device to improve my quality of tracking. Engine diagnostic fault codes. This is a really common thing that you'll see. The device is unplugged, the device has been restarted, the power supply, the battery is poor. Somewhere in this, it's either in the vehicle or in the Go device. The power supply is very suspect, right? It's consistently flowing that 12 volts. So just looking at the fault codes, we know that there's something with the electrical health of either the install or the vehicle itself that we should go and take a look at. Again, didn't need a case number, didn't need a trouble ticket, didn't need anything, just opening my Geotab will give me the answers right there. Engine diagnostic fault codes. If the accelerometer is recording excess data, the system shuts off the recording because the data is basically unusable. If it's swinging and swaying, if it's jiggling, because I've seen some diagnostic plugs where the device sits in the diagnostic plug, but it actually shakes because the device is a little bit long, right? It's about the size of a pack of gum. So if you're going over speed bumps and terrain and things like that, or just rough roads where you live, you can make that thing jiggle a lot. The answer to that is to secure the device using the SPR install bag and an extension harness. The sticky tape is simply to hold it in place while you drill the screws in. I do not think that the bracket will stay on the wall of the vehicle with the sticky tape alone, so I always try to caution on that one. And then just so we're all clear, when we say secure the device, that means the device cannot move 1/4 of an inch in any direction. It moves with the vehicle. It doesn't move independently in any way, shape, or form. Up, down, side to side, front, back, it doesn't do anything. And that's the definition from my friends at Frito-Lay. If you can wiggle that thing more than 1/4 of an inch, you don't have a good install. Do it again. I love this little install bracket. You get 2 zip ties to zip tie the the harness to the Go device and to zip tie the Go device into the bracket. This thing works great. It's an inexpensive way to make sure that you have a quality install and you never have an issue with the device jiggling around. Engine fault detected. This is one where it's not going to necessarily affect the GPS tracking of the device, but the data set is going to change. So some vehicles throw errors when the Go device talks to the CAN bus. And it could be because in the very beginning of this deck, remember I showed you a picture of where that plug wasn't fully pushed down? So you're getting an intermittent communication between the Go device and the CAN bus, and the CAN's trying to answer a question and then it drops, and it just creates all kinds of issues, right? If the Go device detects this situation in your vehicle, it's going to turn off the requests that it's sending to the CAN bus and only listen and take in the data that the vehicle gives automatically. So you're going to get a thinner set of data from this vehicle in this instance. And again, you may want to go back and check your install and make sure that you don't have any loose connections. If that doesn't resolve the issue, then open a case and see what's going on with that particular vehicle. If the car battery is going dead, it says, warning, that battery voltage is low. So this isn't an exception rule. This isn't coming from the rules engine. This is actually a fault the vehicle is triggering, or its battery voltage is too low for a quality connection. And this is another one. This is an actual failure on the Go device itself, and it says the telematics device, you need to report it to your reseller because your flash memory has an issue. In that instance, we just need to RMA the device and get you a new one. And that is pretty much what I had today. I would like to know if there's any questions today.
I have a couple of questions. One of them is the best way to go about looking at when a device is not communicating. A Watchdog Report obviously is the #1 way of looking at that, but Stephanie showed you 2 different ways to look at the device. Sometimes it's after 3 days it's not communicating, then it becomes a device not communicating. Sometimes it's 21 days, which is one of our larger accounts looks at. Sometimes it's 24 hours. I've seen ones that look at it for every hour if they have a big problem with tampering. Not always suggested that you run a Watchdog Report every hour because it might slow down the system just because of the size of the fleet, but sometimes that's what's necessary. That is definitely something I wanted to bring up because that Watchdog Report, as Steph said, is very underutilized and it can be very helpful to you. So use that to the best of the fleet so that you can get the best out of it and find out if you've got a tampering problem that's going on. Maybe you just need to do it temporarily so that everybody knows you're looking at those devices regularly, and that might help as well. Another question that we had here, Steph, and I might pull some other people on the line here to see if we can help with this, and that would be, is there a list of debug logs that can help identify if there's a problem related with coverage? And I think one of those things obviously would be a GPS false transmission.
Yeah, I think that's good, but I don't know if that's going to give you a cellular issue. So I think what you need to do is look for modem restarts or something like that, but the device may have to be in debug mode to start with to see that. I'll tell you what, we'll take it offline with the support department and see what we can find, and we'll add a slide to the deck if there's anything that they can add to that. I know that when I went digging for the different kind of fault codes that you could see, I was amazed by how much my Geotab system tells you what's wrong with that device. I always look at things like if the device goes offline in the shop, at the home office, or at the driver's home, I suspect tampering, because they're going to go someplace they don't want you to know about, typically, right? Mm-hmm. If you unplug the device and you plug it back in, obviously, we're going to send the unauthorized device removal. Rule was broken, right? And that's a good one if they plug it back in, but then you have to use the Watchdog Report if they don't plug it back in. What else you got, Carrie?
One other question I wanted to bring up that just came up here, and that was a concern about different cell providers' coverages. Most coverage is pretty good in the continental U.S. now, as well as all of North America for that matter. There's very few holes, and honestly, if you ever have a question about a hole, I think the best place to look or to start would be looking at the coverage maps. And if you still have a problem with that, or you're not sure about something, then you can certainly call into our support line and they will help you with the coverage maps.
If you have a large fleet, you need to check coverage on 1,000 vehicles for whichever carrier. We do not have a utility in-house to do that, but sometimes we can work with the carrier themselves. They're going to want a zip code. What zip code does this vehicle operate in? And then it'll give you a percentage of coverage in that zip code back. And so, you know, it is reserved for large fleets. If you have 5, you can look up the zip codes of 5 vehicles easily enough. But if you have a large fleet that you need to do a coverage assessment on because you're concerned about outages, and I can tell you there's a handful of places to worry about. Verizon doesn't have coverage in northern Maine, and Verizon doesn't have coverage in South Texas, and the rest of it's pretty good. If you get out to Montana and the wilds, nobody's got coverage. You're going to get coverage in the cities, and you're going to download the data when you're in town, and if you drive from A to B, you're probably going to be out of coverage. And it's the same for all carriers, and when you get to Canada, you have the same situation. I do find that some of the highways, because of trucking and things like that, they do tend to cover the highways between big cities and things like that, so you get more coverage than you think.
And the other thing that I wanted to comment on, because it has come up before, is when you're traveling over the border, you've got to make sure that you have the right type of device that will cover the roaming. So that's just something to put out there. If you do have something that's going over the border, you've got to make sure that you've got the right device to do that. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I think this has been a great session, and we will see you next week. Thanks so much.